Welcome back, everyone. Not too long ago on Twitter, I made a poll asking what people's price target was for the high point of uranium this cycle. Now, the answers were, well, there were a lot of them, and they were kind of what I was expecting. But today, I am just going to be discussing the different ranges and what type of events might cause uranium to peak at the different price points that I talked about in the cycle. Now, before I really get into it, I just want to say that this is not me predicting which of these scenarios will happen because I don't know. I am going to watch and see, and I have theories of what might happen, but really we can't know how this will end or how this will play out until we know all the factors. Now, I just want to say for the purposes of this argument, I'm going to be looking at the next decade or so. I know eventually is different from that because there's a lot of other arguments that can be made, but I'm just going to be looking at the next decade for the purposes of this argument. Also, the scenarios that I discuss, I'm not saying they're particularly very likely or not at all likely, but I'm just saying that they're possible. I'm not saying I believe any or all of them will happen. Now, in true uranium fashion, and I think most of you might get a laugh out of this, I'm going to put the footnotes first. And I just wanted to, I'm not going to read through them all, but basically, when there's an asterisk next to something I say, it means it's either somewhere between very important or could slide and go the other way. And if so, if it does go the other way, it could mean prices go higher than a base case scenario, if you will. And also, they could be based on some unlikely events or what if scenarios or potential for a bunch of things going in unexpected directions. Now, I do realize there are two very important questions when it comes to the price, the fair price of uranium. Let's call it fair price. The first question is there enough production capacity to meet the needs of all of the deliveries, of all the contracting and such? And obviously there needs to be. And the second question is, are there enough known time accessible supply? And by that I mean pounds in the ground that are likely to come out of the ground in a reasonable amount of time and at a reasonable price. Now, one thing I want to say about both of these is, in theory, they exist for a while, for now, most of the time, depending on the scenario, depending on growth. So I'm just going to get into a bunch of the questions now of what type of things could happen. But when I do this, remember that both of these questions need an answer of, is there enough? Yes. And it's a bit tricky. So in the poll, the least popular response to where will the price of uranium peak was 60 or below. Now, I some people did say this is impossible, and I don't think it's impossible. That being said, it's getting less and less likely by the day, in my view. Now, it could have been likely, and I did have an older video that discussed where the price of uranium might peak out, but that kind of assumed that we'd be at 50 by now, and we're not. And so the stress in the system is gathering. So we'll see where we eventually go. But as to what type of events might cause the price to peak at 60 or below, well, you would need a number of the following things to kind of happen together. You would need something like MacArthur restart process starting very soon, maybe sooner than some think. You'd need the Kazakhs being able to increase production significantly. You'd need you'd need disappointing growth in reactors. So like all the build-outs that are supposed to happen would basically kind of never turn up. You'd need many of the low-cost producers that can work at under 50 to 60, and there are a few that work under 60. You would need them to work on their advancement and to um, go potentially into production as soon as they could. You would need the basin, the Athabasca Basin, all of the uranium there to um, go towards production at a historically quick pace. And, and this goes on to question 2 from before, you would need a bunch of the explorers in the basin to find some big, low-cost deposits that could work in the future, and they need to advance them. Now, the other crucial thing is you'd need some inventories. You'd need the current inventories to be more um, full, more stocked, I guess you could say, than um, what some may think, and potentially have them anticipate some potential uh, slow supply response, because I would think that they should know that there's going to be a ramp up time for new production, and so I would think that some could, and probably some do, hold extra production. So if you have enough of those happening at the same time, then it's possible that the price doesn't pass 60 for a while at least, at the very least. Now, that being said, China here is a big deal in terms of growth for a number of reasons. If China does build their 6 to 8 reactors per year going forward, then even a number of those things I don't think will be able to constrain the price. That being said, a number of those reactors aren't being constructed yet. So once we see that, then that'll change. But until then, if that happens, if China starts its build out, well, they would need to stockpile a lot of uranium. And at current production, they would not be able to get it. Now, do they have some already? Probably. So, but will they need more if this build out starts? Absolutely. Now, I mentioned this being big because if this starts happening, almost whatever else happens, then the price of uranium is going far beyond 60. Okay, so now the next least popular response was 60 to 80. And I was surprised that this didn't get more um, love from the poll, let's say, because there are a number of mines that will work in this price range. And in order for this to happen, you'd have to have probably some of the bear cases that I mentioned before, and some other ones would have to happen, but maybe take a bit longer to play out. Um, so in this price range, you get a good chunk of African supply that works. And also in this range, you'd probably need the secondary supply to be fairly steady, because if the secondary supply does go away, and that comes from the underfeeding of tail and enriching, then the price would go higher because that's some supply collapsing. Also critical in this 60 to 80 range, the basin, Athabasca Basin stocks would need to be available in the mid 2020s when some think they will be available. And also in this scenario, another thing that can't happen, and I've seen some people say that this would happen, is the Kazakhs can't be able to produce another 7 million pounds a year for $100 million and do it multiple times. I've seen some people say they can do that. I disagree, but some respectable people announced that Kazakhstan can do that. So now we move into the beyond $80 range. And here it kind of gets tricky because if you go beyond $80, there's not really that much supply that can kind of just needs higher prices. It just kind of becomes a time sensitive thing. And at this point, you just have to look and think, okay, well, how long will the supply reaction take? How long will it take for the mines to ramp up? Will the market, the demand side of the market, be steadfast or will they panic? Because beyond here, it could go anywhere. Will there be concern about the long-term supply? Will that start kicking in as the price is ticking up? I don't know. It might. How and how is as this goes on, are there new reactor starts just building and building and building, or is it just like, well, there's nothing real, no new reactors being constructed, so it's not a panic scenario. You just won't know until it starts happening. And similarly, you have to look at all of the questions from the 0 to 60 and then from the 60 to 80 and how are they answering themselves? Are they going kind of in the bearish case but happening slowly, or are they just not happening at all? This is what's really important to look at beyond $80. So as to the question of will the price peak out in the 80 to 100 range, I'm going to go out a limb here and say this is not exceptionally likely in my view. Why is that? Well, because there's not really that much supply in this range, and it's basically, if it gets to this range, there's nothing really to stop it imminently. Yes, some funds could start selling at this point, and I would liken that to uh, trying to hedge bets while it's very clear that it looks like they are going to win, but it's possible they could be the supply in this range. It's also possible that if the spot price is in the 70s, the long-term contract could be in this range. You never know, and that could be uh, the point where it peaks. It's possible. And it is also possible that the market could be supplied in the 70s, 60s, and the price goes to this range just to incentivize new exploration for uranium. But as for supply coming online at these prices, there's not really anything much in terms of that would be incentivized by these prices, but not prices lower. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think 100 plus is more likely an endpoint than 80 to 100, maybe not more likely than some other $20 range, but just because there's more numbers in 100 plus than 80 to 100. And at this point, yes, the utilities can afford uranium above 100 if they absolutely need to. They can. And at 100 plus, it becomes a concern. There's definitely a concern in the air of, well, maybe there's not enough supply, or maybe long term there's just not enough uranium being discovered. We need more. Or again, in the 100 plus range, it could be the utilities just are panicking. They're capitulating. They're scared. They're concerned. Their jobs, their debt, their all their it. They could be stuck. So that could cause it to go much higher. Now, maybe 100 plus convinces some of the deposits that were long thought way out of the money and barely advanced to move towards advancement. And there are a few that would need significantly higher prices to push forward. I can think of a few, but not that many. So there could be some more supply that would think about moving forward in the 100 plus range, but it is a long time before that much of that supply would even be close to production. Now, would it be rushed at that point? Probably. Will it ever go into production? Who knows? But at this point, at the 100 plus, you got to think that there's a lot of money going into the sector and a lot of people are looking for cheaper uranium. So just to conclude, when you go day by day and the bad things just aren't happening and the good things are happening and the price stays low, it's easy to be like, what is going on, I don't understand why nothing's happening. But then you think about the big picture, and lower for longer means that we eventually go higher. So I'm happy for lower for longer because it gives you more opportunity to just build your position, and wait. And I know, based on what you believe can be at the end of the rainbow, um, it's hard to wait. I know. But we just, most of you that are here that are watching this video, you know. But so we just need to wait and keep watching and keep seeing if the good news just keeps coming. And that's it for today. I will continue talking uranium and other things because if you get too focused on one thing, I find you might miss some other opportunities along the way. That being said, is this a big opportunity? I believe it is, but we will see in the end if it is or is not. But in the meantime, as I said, I'll talk uranium, I'll talk other things. I may talk other things, but that doesn't mean I've forgotten about uranium. Absolutely not. I keep buying. And I hope you enjoyed this talk. More uranium coming, more other stuff coming, and hope you enjoyed. Thanks, everyone. Hey everyone, just quickly, you can read this here or in the description of any video. Just remember, what I do and say here is meant to be a helpful supplement or thought filter for your research, not a replacement for it. I can be wrong, and I'm often quite early, aka wrong for a good while, which is why none of this is ever investment advice.